All right, so we're ready to begin our adventure. We're right beside, or on, I guess, the southern side or western side of the Stillwater Creek Bridge, which the concrete part for it was built in 1921. So let's get rolling here. We're probably really backlit on the second camera. Luna's excited. So here we have our first little remnant. So we have a flanger sign for the bridge crossing. So as I mentioned in the introduction, we are going to be running parallel to the Canadian Pacific line, which is right here. We're going to be coming alongside of it momentarily. And so here we're coming, the two rail lines come side by side, and we're going to be staying like this right until we get to Red Rock. So again, it's a very sort of unusual arrangement, but one that was sort of dictated by the geography of the area and the ability to construct a rail line in a cost-effective manner. You'll notice that you can see these ridges here. There was no other way around those ridges than to sort of come through this area for both rail lines. The bugs are horrendous today. The mosquitoes are just insane. So 3 weeks ago was the last time we did any type of railway work, and the bugs were just coming out, and now they're out with a vengeance. And what's unusual is because it's been very dry. I know we had kind of a bit of a wet early part of the spring, but May and June have been particularly dry. We haven't had a whole ton of precipitation, very little actually. It's very, very dry. So we've gone from one extreme to the other. So here we have our first little neat thing. So basically, you have a culvert. There's a creek that runs under the Canadian Pacific, and you can see it runs under the Canadian National Line, and you can see the two culverts are almost touching each other. So the Canadian Pacific, it's a metal culvert with concrete collars, and the Canadian National one has a old segmented concrete culvert. I am calling it the Canadian Pacific. I know officially it's the Canadian Pacific Kansas City now. This is the main line, Canadian Pacific, so this is their main line across Canada. This particular part is the Nipigon subdivision, which runs from Scriber to Thunder Bay. So here you can see a little bit better of the geography. You can see these massive, massive ridges that run here alongside Nipigon Bay. We're going to be coming alongside, or actually you can see it, we're alongside the bay already, but to the point where you can actually see it in a second here. It's a little bit of a breeze, which is nice to keep the bugs away. There's a lot of haze, lots of forest fires in the western part of Canada and the eastern part of Canada, and there's lots of smoke wafting around, so lots of Lots of haze. Make sure Luna's with us. So again, we are running 2 cameras here. Probably the one where you see my face is probably bouncing around like crazy. It's hard to keep it steady on the mount just because the way it is, so it's sort of bouncing back and forth like this. So here, up here, you can see some of the signaling equipment on the Canadian Pacific line. Again, this is a main line, so the signaling equipment is normal. The Kinghorn was not signaled because it was a secondary line. So basically they, instead of using signals, they used radio communication. Again, there wasn't a lot of traffic, so this morning, usually Sunday morning, so it is a Sunday morning. Usually Sunday mornings are pretty quiet on the Canadian Pacific line. That's why I like to come here on Sunday mornings. I don't fancy coming across the train. There was actually 2 trains in a row this morning. So when I was leaving camp, there's a crossing and there was a westbound, and so I had to wait for that. And then literally, the ballast is bad on this section. Literally, a few minutes later, I saw a second westbound, just a little bit further to the east. So here you can start seeing we're getting into the rock work. Here you can see some of the massive cliffs that we will be sort of pointing out and talking about. This is sort of one of the big features of this area. You can see the milepost marker on the Canadian Pacific, milepost 66. So here, cross over here. Here there's actually this spot here. There's a photograph. If you go to my page on Red Rock, I'll put a link in the video description. You'll actually see a photograph that was taken, I believe, in the 70s, and it shows the Canadian Pacific passenger train, the Canadian, coming down here. So it's taken from that track, and you can see the Kinghorn, and you can see those cliffs in the background. And so just up here, you can see there's another little piece of rock work, but you'll notice the very distinctive color of the rock. And we've talked about this on numerous occasions on the railway explorations. So this is the rock that gives the community of Red Rock its name. It's officially known as Cuesta. I'll put that up on the screen. And so what it is basically it's a very iron-rich sedimentary rock. And it's part of a very unique geological formation known as the Sibley Group. And the Sibley Group basically runs from just east of Thunder Bay all the way up into this area. If it shows up on the map, I'll flash you up a piece of a geologic map, and you can see kind of the rock formation. So in this area here, the ballast is just brutal, which is surprising given that it's very well traveled, but I guess there was just so much ballast laid down Some spots it's okay, like right now it's okay. Just up here where we're gonna get to these cliffs, it's crazy how thick it is. Like to the point where I can't even pedal. So here you can see some cast off rail. So being a main line, the Canadian Pacific is all continuously welded rail or ribbon rail or whatever they call it, whatever descriptor you want to use. Is basically this big long quarter-mile pieces of rail, and then they weld them together, and so that way there's no joints or seams like the old traditional rail was. The Kinghorn was a mix. There were some spots where they did put continuously welded rail in place, but most of it was still all old 100-pound jointed rail. So I believe the sections of rail are 39 feet long, and so they would have had rail connectors, joint bars, fish plates, whatever you want to call them, with bolts and nuts that secure them, right? And so the continuously welded rails are much smoother. There's no bouncing or pinging, right? You know, you see a jointed rail, and every time there's a joint, it's kind of a weak spot, right? And so you hear a bing, bing, bing as the wheels are turning over the tracks. So here you can see some of the old bottom posts for the poles. I believe that is the, I don't know if that was the telegraph line, because the telegraph line was always on this side of the grade, and there are spots where you can see cribs for it, so that might have been power line. The telegraph line was always on the north/east side of the grade. Am I getting that right? No, that's not right. Because the telegraph line's always on the west side/north side. That might have very well been the telegraph line. All right, so here is where it starts to get interesting for a whole bunch of reasons. Luna's still with us. The ballast starts to get thicker, and you can start to see we're starting to get into these cliffs. And you can see the measures that the Canadian Pacific has taken to guard against rockfall. So they have, I believe those fences with the wires are a rockfall warning system. You can see some of the big concrete blocks to prevent the rocks from rolling onto the tracks. There's actually, looks like a big chunk of rock right here that fell down at some point. All right, so this is the type of stuff that they're concerned with. All right, so if you look up at the top of that cliff, that's pushing 100 feet, I guess. Let's check. What's our elevation? 613 feet. Oh, easily. GPS is telling me the top of that ridge is at 150 feet. So yeah, that's a ways up there. That's 200 feet. So the ballast isn't bad here, but just when we get up around the corner there, it's going to get bad. I do apologize if you're getting glare in the camera. There's not much I can do because we're kind of running south here, and the sun is just coming up. 9:30. Again, there's a bit of haze, but it's not helping that much. So up here is the sort of big cliff area. Here you can see there's a tie that's still in place. Here you can see some of the degradation that's happened to the grade here. You can see there's been some low spots here where some of the culverts are, that the grade has sort of subsided. So this is actually why we were out here today. We were filming in this particular area where these cliffs are, and you're going to see them a little bit better as we turn the corner. You can see the ballast. It's very large size crushed rock, and it's thick. So the reason why we were out here is because we were filming a little addition to our exploration series, to our offbeat series, about an accident that happened when they were building this line. So, oh my God, I can't ride in this. So what ended up happening was in November of 1911, they were doing the construction through this area. And as I mentioned earlier, the big challenge to build through this area was, where do you put the rail line? And so Canadian Pacific had the same problem when they built their line. They basically had to skirt Nipigon Bay here. And that was back 1884, 1885. So when Canadian Northern comes along, it's one of the reasons why they didn't want to build the line through this area, because it was going to be very, very difficult to do because of the geography. And there wasn't really a lot of route options. So let's try to jump back up on the bike here. So that's why they tried to get a running rights agreement with Canadian Pacific, and that didn't work out. So when they had to build, their only option was to build outboard of the Canadian Pacific line. And so what we're on right now is just all, oh my God, is all just rock fill. Gets a little bit better right here. So this was all dumped in here to create the grade. And as you're going to see a little bit further up, there were erosion issues that they had to deal with. So here you can see the massive size of the cliffs. You can see the red cuesta. And so in terms of the accident, so again, I'll put a link to the video that I'm doing. Is that a train coming? And so anyway, they had to, and I'm guessing it was here because there's no real description of where the accident took place. So I'm sort of making a logical guess that it was in this area because of the height of the cliffs, how tight it is with the grade, the curve. So they had to basically blast rock out from the rock face here and use that rock to infill. And unfortunately, the Canadian Pacific line was an active line. So you basically have trains running back and forth. So what happened is the crews, when they were blasting, they would sort of hug the side of the cliffs because there's nowhere else to go, right? Because you have the lake beside you. So they would hug the cliffs to get out of the way of the trains. And unfortunately, there was a couple workers who were Italian who weren't able to get out of the way of the train and were basically struck and killed by the train. So very, very tragic circumstance. So again, you'll see the link for that in the description and up on the screen. Again, you can see the height of the cliffs. You can see the red cuesta. These things here are actually rock fall warning systems. So again, you have wires that are stretched in between. We're back into the terrible ballast here, that basically detect if a rock falls on the rails. Here, there's actually, you can see that the rock face almost overhangs the track and the dangers that it poses. There's an incident, I don't remember when it happened, probably not long after the Canadian National Open, or the Canadian Northern Open, where there was a wreck on the Canadian Pacific, and it ended up blocking the Canadian Northern line because all of the trains and all the debris and everything fell on this line right towards the lake. You can see the fencing to again hold back the the rock, and I'm sure there's detection systems in there to see if the rock actually breaks the fence. So if we pause here and turn back, and then up here you can see the yet more of the concrete blocks. And so here the bay widens out, the river widens out, and just up ahead is red rock. I don't know if you can see it on the camera, but basically there's the water tank. Okay, we're gonna hold up here for a second and then just continue with our journey here. All right, let's resume here. So the next big thing that you're going to see is you'll see some of the erosion prevention methods. Actually have some right here that were undertaken to help shore up this line. So you'll notice that there's been a whole pile of concrete ties that have been dumped in here, and you're going to see these all the way for the next little bit. So I'll tell you the story of this. So there's a bunch of sections of this. This is probably the biggest one here. And then there's a couple sections along Orient Bay. So just at the bottom end of Pidgetawabik Bay, right near Orient Bay Station, there's a bunch. And then there's a bunch by milepost 93, south of Cove Inlet, where there's some that's dumped in here. So again, here you can see more examples of that. So the story with those is that those concrete ties were defective, and I don't know the exact story. You know, a bunch of CN guys told me that the reason why they dumped those. Oh, there's some sort of duck or bird. There's one right there. So I'll watch where I'm driving here. So either CN realized that they were defective when they first got them, or they found out that they were defective once they had been put into place. But in any case, CN now has thousands of these defective ties, and so the question is, I guess, what to do with them. And so what ends up happening is CN decides to use them for stuff like this. So the proper technical term, so you can see, sorry, you can see red rock up in the distance, you can see the water tower. The proper technical term is riprap. So basically any type of material that you use for erosion control is known as riprap. So you can see more of it here. And so they just dumped these ties in here, and there's hundreds of them dumped in here, right? I guess it's just, you have all these concrete ties, it just makes a real expedited form of erosion control. And so here you can see more examples of the Cuesta. So here somewhere, I think it was here, there used to be the sign that was pointing that Red Rock Station was up ahead. So there are a yellow sort of triangular sign. I'll flash a picture up there. So I was here in November 2020. So it was my first kind of walk through this area. Lily and I came for a walk. I think it was November. Anyway, and I saw the sign, and then we came back the following spring, so again 2 years ago, when we did the exploration through this area, and the sign was gone. Somebody took the sign. Okay, Luna's still with us, which is good. Beautiful day. So you can see here, the rock is not as much of an issue. Things start to widen out a little bit. This is still all rock fill. Again, you can see more of those concrete ties. Again, just piles and piles and piles of them. All right. Okay, we're actually coming almost to the end of our journey here. Again, you can just see all of those ties in there. Does create some discussion. Obviously, there's people that are concerned about, you know, stuff like that just being sort of dumped in the water, and you know, any potential environmental damage. Ballast gets much better here. Dog's still with us. Okay. That's a good thing. I think you can see the water tank nice and clear now. So Red Rock, there wasn't really anything here when the rail line was built. They had planned to put a station here named Crawford, but that never happened, basically because you have Nipigon, which was a major station on the line just to the north of us, right? So the original line ran from Jellicoe to Port Arthur. So Nipigon was the halfway point, and so Nipigon was a major station. Actually had a station building, water tank, coal. So they never built anything. Where things started to happen was in the 1930s, when they started construction on a paper mill here in Red Rock, and obviously pulp and paper were becoming sort of very, very big industries in the area. Sorry, I'm just looking for something that's supposed to be in this area. And anyway, so eventually the community became known as Red Rock, and probably the name comes from the First Nation people that obviously inhabited this area for many, many thousands of years. So you can see more ties here. And so once the mill was built, then eventually stations were created. That's what I was looking for, this concrete pad. No idea what that pad is for. Doesn't look like we checked it out before. There's no attachment points or anything on there, so I'm not sure what the heck that pad was for. So both Canadian Pacific and Canadian National built stations, and then what they did was they constructed spurs running down to the paper mill to obviously bring wood and then pull out the finished paper out of the mill. And so originally there was an interlock just to the west, on the west side of the highway that comes into the town. So that was built in the 1930s, like 37-ish. And then eventually the interlock was moved to the east side of the highway. I'll put up some links to those things. And that's where it remains to this day. So both lines had spurs. Basically they had spurs going down there, and then it merged into one line, which was owned by the paper company. There's something up here too. There's more concrete ties here. And so what was I going to say? This was the only spot where there was actually signaling equipment on the Kinghorn, because they had to have signals for that interlock. And so about a mile out there was a signal for the interlock. The one on the west side is still there. The signal tower is still there. The one on the east side here, I've looked, I don't see it. And then there were two closer to the actual interlock. The pad or the base for the eastern one is still there. The western one, can't find it. So anyway, so the paper mill operated right up until about the time that this rail line shut down. Again, you can see more ties here, and it was one of the reasons why this line shut down is just because the business, the amount of industries on this line continue to decline all the time, and just robbed the line of more and more business. Sorry. There's a ladder. I don't know if somebody put that in there or where that may have come from. So there's another erosion control area here, and this one is rather interesting as well. So here they've placed these giant concrete slabs. I don't know if they were made specifically for stuff like this or if they were something else and they were repurposed. You'll notice that they have chunks of wire that they basically use kind of as lifting lugs. And so they put, I think there's 6 of them or 7 of them, these big sort of slabs right here along the shore, basically to keep the wave action from eroding the grade. Again, it's just kind of neat to see the measures that they took to secure it. So here somewhere, maybe we went by it already, there's a little chunk of, oh, it's back there. There was a little chunk of concrete, and I don't know if that had something, that was a part of a signal. So what we're entering here, and this is where we're going to end our exploration here, is we're basically entering what used to be, it wasn't a yard, it was known as a storage pocket for the paper mill here at Red Rock. And so I'll flash up a piece of map here, and so what you would see is just a series. So there's the Canadian Pacific Spur right beside us. So I will jump up there and show you this. Oh, look, there's a piece of broken insulator, number 48. Don't know what kind that is. So this is the Canadian Pacific Spur. So again, this is when it was moved. Originally it wasn't here, so remember it was on the east side, west side of the highway. So you can see the ties are still here, and so it would have come off the Canadian Pacific line and run this way down to the interlock point. So again, you can see all these ties here running down that way. So anyway, so as I was saying, you had this so-called storage pocket, and so you had all of these lines here, all of these pieces of rail, right? Multiple pieces of rail here where they would have used to store the cars coming out of the paper mill, and then basically deciding which line they were going to be put on, whether it was the Canadian National or the Canadian Pacific. And then one of these lines was the spur, the Canadian National Spur that ran down to the mill. So I'll show you that piece of map. Okay, so this brings us to the end of this little adventure here. So hopefully you kind of saw a little of the geography and the rail line in this area. We will be exploring the storage pocket here and the interlock and where the station was here at Red Rock, but we're going to do that probably in the spring. And the reason why is the amount of growth now. When all these leaves and all the trees are in full leaf, you can't see anything because there still are rails in place, and there's parts of the switch and the interlock and stuff like that, but you can't see it. with all this growth. So we're gonna have to come here like really, really early spring when there's no leaves and everything's all flattened down. Anyway, hopefully you've enjoyed our little exploration.